So my name is Dr. Teresa Foley, and I am an instructor in the Department of Integrative Physiology. Okay, so I didn't know that I wanted to be an instructor actually until almost halfway through my PhD. So when I originally started my undergrad, I wanted to be a physical therapist. Then I worked with patients and realized that I had trouble working with patients who weren't really wanting to do their homework per se, and they weren't wanting to do their exercises. So I got really frustrated with them, and they got frustrated with me. So my senior year of my undergrad, I switched focuses and decided to join a research lab. So I did some science, and I worked in Dr. Moni Fletcher's immunology lab, and I learned some great experiences. I had great experiences with her, as well as got to work with animals, but at the same time I missed that human interaction. And so halfway through my PhD program, there was a program on CU that was called Science Squad, where rather than TAing, you would go down to Denver twice a week, and you would interact with high school and middle school students, and you would act as kind of a guest speaker, guest lecturer for that day. It was actually during that experience that I realized that I really love teaching, and I really do want to work with people. There was an actual experience that happened that made me realize that I wanted to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. And it actually happened when I was interacting with a fifth grader.
Oh.
So I was working in the science squad down in Denver, and I was giving a presentation on how the brain works. And I would teach them the different neuroanatomy of the brain and what happens here and what happens here. And so one of the things, I had a student come up to me and he said, I don't understand why we only get headaches on the front side of her brain. Like, why don't we get headaches on the back side, or like on just the right side?
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those that I had no idea. I had stopped in my tracks. I was like, here, I've taught this student, or this fifth grader, everything he knows about neuroanatomy, and now he's asking me questions that I don't know. So I remember rushing back to campus and talking to one of the postdocs in the lab, and I was asking him, I said, why don't we get headaches on the back of our head? And I realized it was that interaction with students where they can ask you things that even you don't know, and you're learning as you're teaching them. And I realized that that's really what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wanted to continue learning, and I wanted to learn from students who have a whole other perspective outside of just research. And they're not thinking about things as a scientist, they're thinking about things in kind of a practical aspect of it. So I'm definitely more aware of immunology in my everyday life while I'm teaching immunology.
Okay.
So as you'll see on my desk, actually right here, I have 2 different types of hand sanitizer because I get to be a total germaphobe. So last week in particular, I went down to Sewell, the dorm, to grab just a bite. And as I was walking in, there was a student there who started sneezing, and he sneezed on his hands, went over, grabbed a sandwich, walked up to the counter, and handed it to the cashier. And all the time I'm thinking, he's got germs on his hand. He's got germs on his hand. So unfortunately, the cashier didn't really pay attention, and she didn't notice. So he bought a sandwich, and he walked out, and I was the next in line. And there was some hand sanitizer there, and I made her clean her hands with hand sanitizer. I said, I'm sorry, he just sneezed on his hands. And so actually everyone that was in the area, I made them put hands. So I actually think scientific writing is a very good skill to have, and I think it's very important as scientists because it's the way that scientists are able to transfer information about experiments that they've done. My problem with scientific writing, though, is that it's a whole nother language. And so oftentimes when you write these really elaborate research articles, and then you have somebody in the layperson trying to understand it, they have no idea what's going on. So oftentimes I can see how scientific writing can be a bad thing, and that you're kind of limiting it to just scientists being able to understand those articles. Whereas one of my dream jobs is to be able to translate some of that scientific research articles into something that either a pamphlet or worksheet or something that a layperson could understand. But I do think it is a very important skill for students to have, especially undergraduate students moving on to potential research opportunities or even med school, because you have to be able to communicate what you're doing without you have to just lay out the facts, and that's essentially what scientific writing is. It's just it's a set way to explain your designs or any of that such.
Yeah.
So I have currently published 10 different manuscripts. Most of them I was a co-author on them when I was doing my master's as well as dissertation research. The last one I published was just last year, which is the final project on my dissertation where I was looking at how exercise changes the reward pathways in your brain. So I did an experiment with rats where I would look to measure whether or not rats found running rewarding, and for the rats that did, I looked within their brains to see what was changing within their chemistry of their brain to make them enjoy exercise more than the rats that didn't enjoy